Yeah.
and then the light comes on. I kept looking for that, but that's the key light that you're on.
Good morning, everybody. It's now 10 o'clock, so it's time for me to open these hearing sessions into the examination of the South Tyneside local plan. Just to introduce myself, my name is David Spencer. I'm the inspector appointed by the Secretary of State to carry out this independent examination. Can I just check with everybody in the room? Can you hear me where necessary and see me? Yep, good. Can I please ask at this early stage that people ensure that mobile phones are switched off, please, or on their silent settings? And at this early stage, can I please invite the council in for general housekeeping, particularly what we do in the event of the fire alarm going off, please?
Okay, good morning everyone. We're not expecting a fire alarm this morning, so if there is an alarm, please can you make your way to the nearest fire exit, which is just on the far side of the room, and then make your way to the far side of the hotel car park and await instruction from hotel staff. The toilets are just outside this room and across the corridor. Please note that there are cables taped to the floor, so please be careful when you're moving around the room. Also, the hotel operates a parking eye system, so if you have parked your car in the car park, please ensure you've entered your registration number in the devices at the hotel reception.
Thank you for that. Can I just check for today's proceedings, do you have anybody here present from the local press? Thank you. I think on day one, was it the Shields Gazette? Okay, thank you. Now these sessions are being recorded and live streamed by the council, and the recordings will be available on the council's website after these sessions, so enable those who can't attend to observe proceedings. But can I check, does anybody else wish to make their own separate recordings of this morning's session? No? Okay. Now these are, as I say, public meetings held in public, but it's only persons who are seated around the table who can make contributions or speak at these hearing sessions in terms of exercising their right to be heard because they have concerns about the soundness and or legal compliance of the plan. I will bring everybody in on relevant parts of this morning's discussion as we work through the agenda and the issues that I'd identified that were published as part of my matters, issues and questions back in early May. And hopefully everybody is here for Matter 5, Issue 3, which is land at North Farm, East Boldon. This proposed allocation site GA2 within the plan at policy SP7. And I'm specifically looking at this particular allocation. I'm not necessarily here today to talk about other sites or sites that are not within the plan. It's the soundness of this particular site. Try and run these discussions as sort of informal but run these hearing sessions as informal but structured discussions. So I will endeavour to bring, as I say, everybody in at a relevant point in the proceedings. If there is at any point you think I want to come in on a particular matter and you think that it's relevant to your particular representations that you made on the plan, upend your nameplate and that will signal to me to bring you in at the appropriate point. That's just a general outline of how these sessions work. Are there any particular questions about the procedure or how these hearings work? I think looking around the table, most people have been to previous sessions, so know how these work. Now, my memory says you're not Mr. Martin.
Your memory serves you correctly. Mr. Martin's on holiday this week, so I'm Mr. Waff, Mr. Martin's colleague, here on behalf of Bellway Homes.
Thank you for that. I think it would be helpful at this stage, because these hearing sessions are being recorded, and obviously there are people in the room who are observing as well. If I can invite people to kind of introduce themselves, and if I start on my right with the council's team, please, Mr. Shadaravian.
Morning, sir. Paul Shadaravian, KC, acting for the council.
Deborah Lamb, Operations Manager for the Spatial Planning Team at South Tyneside Council.
Rachel Cooper, Senior Plan and Policy Officer at South Tyneside Council.
Matt Clifford,
also a Senior Planning Policy Officer at the Council.
Morning, sir. My name's Trevor Mail. I'm Service Lead for Strategic Transport at the Council.
Morning, Frances Hampson from Deloitte, here on behalf of the Church Commissioners for England.
Morning, I'm Dominic Waff from Pegasus Group on behalf of Bellway Homes.
Morning everyone, Joe Thompson speaking on behalf of East Boldon Neighbourhood Forum.
Good morning everyone, Mervyn Butler, Secretary of Clean East Boldon Labour Party.
Thank you for that. Okay, as I say, I'm going to work through the agenda. We're going to be looking specifically at this particular site. As I said, on day one, I've had the opportunity to kind of visit the locations. I've seen the site from various kind of public perspectives. Obviously, this is a site that has a public right-of-way across it, so I've walked that footpath and I've walked the, I'm going to describe it as a bridleway, but it's kind of tarmacked kind of footpath, cycleway that runs along the eastern boundary of the site and looked at the wider environs and facilities within East Boldon. So those are in my mind as we discuss this particular site. I just wonder, before we get into item 2 and Greenbelt impacts, just two sort of general things I just wanted to bring to the attention of the examination. Obviously, I was made aware as part of the previous hearing sessions, and obviously it's in the examination library, that there is a made neighbourhood plan for East Boldon. I think that was made at the end of 2021. So that's currently part of the adopted development plan for the area. But also mindful there's been a recent statement of common ground between the council and the church commissioners who are promoting site GA2. We had this issue yesterday in relation to Fellgate. I've read the statement of common ground. I don't know if other people have had an opportunity to see that document. It's relatively brief. Slightly different to Fellgate, it does introduce potential modifications to the wording of the policy. But in general terms, I mean, I'm going to summarise. I mean, it largely retains the respective positions of the council and the site promoter in relation to this site, but I will afford an opportunity either the council or the church commissioners want to say anything about that particular statement of common ground.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the proposed modifications that you picked up there were just to provide some additional clarity that we felt was missing from the policy. And similar to the other statements of common ground, it just sort of clarifies the position between the two parties in terms of the trajectory of the site and the deliverability of the site.
Thank you for that. Ms Hampson, is there anything further you want to add from the church commissioners? No. Mr Butler, please.
Thank you, sir. The statement of common ground refers to an issue which you haven't put in the agenda for this morning. That's the issue of agricultural land and the grading. I would ask your advice as to whether we can raise that issue, because there is a statement in the statement of common ground that is out of line with the position in the council statement.
Thank you. Yes, in principle, we can bring in agricultural land. I think probably the relevant part of the agenda probably be under environmental considerations. So if we introduce that as a new point 3.
Thank you.
I do appreciate I did have a matters issue question on that. I think I'm clear on the council's position on this, but we can explore that there. I'll make a note of that so I don't forget. Okay, thank you. So, moving on to item 2 of the agenda in relation to Greenbelt impacts and compensatory improvements. I had 2 questions on this, which various people have responded to. I appreciate there is disagreement in the room, but if I can turn to the council, please, in the first instance to respond or to the kind of key points from its response to my matters issues and questions 529 and then separately 530. In terms of the assessment of this, the parcel, I think it's the wider parcel BON3, and then the ability to secure compensatory improvements, please. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. So the site GA2 was assessed in the South Tyneside Greenbelt study as parcel BON3, which also included the area directly adjacent to the proposed allocation as well. Appendix C of the study provides more detail in terms of how the site was assessed. The site was assessed as having low harm against Purpose 1, Purpose 2 and Purpose 4, and a moderate rating of harm against Purpose 3. It's noted that the assessment states that the site shares a strong relationship with the urban area, which surrounds the built area surrounds the site to the west and the north. Appendix C also sets out a menu of options for enhancements in the Greenbelt and the surrounding area, which could be compensatory measures. Those key considerations have been filtered through into policy SP7, in particular the creation of defensible boundaries, enhanced surrounding public rights of way, retention of existing trees and hedgerows, and exploration of the renaturalisation of the watercourse. Also, just to draw attention to paragraph 5.17 of the supporting text of policy SP7, which is applicable to all the policies in terms of compensatory measures for the Greenbelt sites and improvements. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Lamb. So even though this is a site from the Council's Greenbelt Review, evidence scores either low or no impact or harm on various purposes of the Greenbelt, nonetheless, the Council it's looking at the issue cumulatively goes with the highest harm, so it's assessing it as a site that would have overall moderate harm based on one purpose.
Yes, that's correct. So that's in accordance with the methodology of the wider study.
Thank you. If I turn to the back of the room, I don't think Ms Hampson or Mr Waff necessarily dispute the Council's approach or assessment. I appreciate on behalf of Bellway, it's I understand your submissions are, if you're looking at this site, the site in front of us in this way, it therefore follows that other surrounding or adjacent land should be looked at in a similar way as part of this wider BON3 parcel in terms of a land immediately to the east.
Yeah, that's correct, and in that regard, we're happy to rely on the written evidence that we've put forward at this stage in regards to that particular matter.
But Mr Thompson for the East Boldon Forum and Mr Butler for the Local Labour Party, I think you disagree with how the Greenbelt has been assessed here. You think the harm has been underestimated against the various purposes.
Thank you very much, Mr Spencer. Can I just say I'm taking over from Mr Hutchison, our secretary, who was absolutely exhausted after last week. So he was revived in the Grey Horse at East Boldon with several drinks. However, he's asked me to step in and try and make a case here. I'm not an expert in planning law, and I can't speak with authority about the Greenbelt. All I can talk about is its value to East Boldon and the value to all of the people who back the East Boldon neighbourhood plan. We've been tracking this site, since we came about several years ago, and the history of it in terms of the background papers are worth mentioning. The original background paper talked about the importance of a buffer on the north side of the site, to try and address the loss of the green belt and the issue around the wildlife corridor. The site itself actually, although it is in a built-up area, is open. It affords wonderful views to the north. It slopes towards its bottom end, and as you pointed out earlier, there is a bridleway that runs along its eastern end. In effect, it's a central sort of spine between the west field and the east field. On the other side of New Road, immediately beyond the site, is the Tileshed Burn. West Farm Meadows are an SSI site, and nearby is the Tileshed Local Nature Reserve. So its importance to the wildlife is very, very important to understand. The Council's Wildlife Corridor Network Review final report indicated that the northern 2/3 of the site is included in the wildlife corridor that runs through the area. The earlier 2022 Stage 3 Greenbelt Review exceptional circumstances, highlighted the biodiversity. It pointed out that there was flooding on the bottom end of the site, and that considerable greenbelt and infrastructure mitigation would be required. It also said that mitigation is not considered to impact viability. And, we understand that the profits from this scheme will run into many millions of pounds, perhaps even over 11 million. So there is headroom to deal with this site in terms of mitigation. But I have to say, East Boldon Neighbourhood Forum's primary position is this site should not have come forward. And Mr Hutchison spoke eloquently last week about the council not needing to go into the green belt, that there was flexibility in terms of the housing numbers that it set. We presented information and evidence to support that. And that was from the Secretary of State's department, who said that the standard method delivered a starting point and exceptional circumstances could include the constraint of the green belt. So we've ended up with this situation where we've got an arbitrary figure, and the impact is that we've got to see sites like this being consumed by housing. I just want to talk a little bit about the Greenbelt, the Council's subsequent Greenbelt study final report, which talks about how the site could be mitigated. It references the Eastfield site as an area that could be used to mitigate this. And, to East Boldon Neighbourhood Forum, this seems so fanciful. That site, as we know, is subject to the possibility of further development, and to put that forward as a means of mitigation does not seem coherent at all. I think at that point I'll just pause there, but I would like to come on to talk about the further work that we need to do to mitigate this site if it does come forward.
Thank you. So before I bring in Mr. Butler, Mr. Thompson, I'm fairly clear from the forum's representations, as you say, from a Greenbelt perspective. I think the change or the modification you would invite me to consider making would be to remove the whole site from the plan. There should be no development on this site. But I think the forum has applied itself to, well, if this plan does go ahead in some way, shape or form as kind of submitted, then the alternative would be only to look at development within, I'll call it the southern parcel, and the northern parcel either remain as Greenbelt or clearly identified, as I think you referred to, as a kind of a buffer.
Yes, that sums it up very, very well, actually. Thank you. You know, the fact that this site, 2/3 of this site, is affected by the wildlife corridor, in our estimation, if it does come forward, in terms of mitigation, there's such a compelling case to provide an area that really does work in terms of the wildlife corridor. Not only that, the actual numbers that come forward, and we'll talk about this, I know, further down the agenda, but the numbers that will come forward here has such a profound effect on the lives of people who live in the village and the way that the village is actually structured. Yeah, so that is our position. We believe the site should not have come forward. We would ask that it's removed. However, if you're minded that it does come forward, we believe that the northern 1/3 of the site, i.e. the land between the public right-of-way, which crosses from Boker Lane to the Bridle Way, to the new road, should be used as a means of mitigation. It should be used as a means of providing open space, which is another requirement of the earlier reports. And as far as the Suds basin is concerned, you know, that is a real opportunity to provide a wetland site that is well landscaped, that would function on all sorts of levels, not only to give open space, not only to provide mitigation for nature, but also to screen the development from the very, very busy new road. So at all sorts of levels, it does make sense to us to think about that northern 1/3 of the site. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Butler, please.
Thank you, sir. In terms of the Greenbelt assessment, the comments I made at last week's hearing in relation to the overall situation, you know, apply absolutely to this site. We are concerned about how the study has taken forward these views. We don't agree with the assessment of the study that it's low or no harm in relation to purpose 1 and 2. I mean, it's clear people understand that the development of this site will not only reduce the gap between West and East Boldon, which you know, has remained there despite development in the early 1990s. Most importantly, it reduces the gap between East and West Boldon and South Shields. And the narrowness of the green belt at this point is already you know, making the situation of its purposes. So to suggest that there's no or low or no harm in relation to those purposes is something we can't agree with. And in relation to purpose 3, where we're talking about the moderate assessment, this position accepts that the release of the site would expand the Boldons into the open countryside. The tree cover at the boundary of New Road is not in place at the western end, and also is not in place as you come along Boker Lane. Therefore, there is already open views across those fields to when viewed from the west and from the north. And the Stantec document submitted at Regulation 19 on behalf of the Church Commissioners in its landscape diagram illustrates the open views from Boker Lane and from New Road across the site. And continuing on the issue of openness, the Greenbelt study paragraphs 2.23, 2.24 and 2.25 relates to the planning policy guidance on Greenbelt, something you referred to yourself, sir, last week, and paragraph 145 of the MPPF. And that refers to the fact that if we are going to have exceptional circumstances of land taken out of Greenbelt, compensatory improvements to environmental quality and accessibility of the remaining Greenbelt is important. And what we see here is, with the Statement of Common Ground, to some aspects, a reduction in the offer of compensatory improvements to the site only. And we'll come on in a minute after Mr. Thompson gives more evidence to say why we feel that if we're going to have a development of this site, bringing in such large-scale profits to a housing developer which hasn't been named, these compensatory improvements need to be much wider than are being suggested.
Thank you. Ms Hampson, please, next.
Just briefly, just to highlight that obviously ecology and SUDs are not a Greenbelt matter and are to be discussed later on within the agenda. The other point just to add is obviously we believe the principle of the Greenbelt release was discussed in depth last week, and the need for these sites to be released to meet the housing need within the local authority area, and we believe those points remain relevant to the conversation today.
Thank you. I mean, I think in terms of the Greenbelt harm impact, I mean, obviously that's something I'll be considering and bringing into judgment from visiting the site, looking at the kind of particular circumstances as to kind of the reasonableness of the council's assessment and the alternatives that are presented to me. I think in terms of the nearest, I think it's been described as part of South Shields, if that's the correct term. So this would be on the Boldon lane as you go over the railway. Is that the kind of the nearest built development as you go north?
Yes, so as you go up Benton Lane, you come to the suburbs of Whiteleys and Biddick Hall, and you have a development site on the former Tutor Eade school as well, which is in progress of development. So there's already, that's a brownfield replacement, but it's on the edge of the Greenbelt.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. The issue of the Suds Basin might not be a Greenbelt matter per se, but you know it can play such a role in compensating for the loss of habitat. The prospect of a dry Suds Basin would be such an anomaly, given the proximity of the site to the Tileshed Burn and the River Don. And although this is a detail, I realise that it's such an important one that we would ask that you consider adding this to the list of site requirements. As far as the list of site requirements are concerned, we are grateful to our planning colleagues for allowing the recognition of the East Boldon Neighbourhood Plan and of course its design code. For us, one of the most important items of that list is how the public right-of-ways and cycleways are to be improved. Without that, it is really difficult to see how any development on this site could work without so severely affecting the lives of people who live in the village. It would be such an omission. I'll talk a little bit about that in infrastructure, if you don't mind. The openness of the site to East Boldon Neighbourhood Forum and the opportunity that it provides for the people, the protection that it gives to nature, the openness that it provides, it would be a great loss to East Boldon. So, as we've said, sir, the improvements that we can make would be the mitigation of a sizable piece of land to the north and all of the items that are set out in the Statement of Understanding. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it a further point, Mr. Butler?
Thank you, sir. The key considerations for GA2 described by the Council as a menu of options for enhancements in the green belt surrounding each site in the appendix. And we don't feel that this menu goes far enough. It does not detail the entire potential enhancement measures suggested in the green belt study at paragraph 2.23. The proposed biodiversity enhancements to the land to the east, that Mr. Thompson's already mentioned. This also is part of the proposals in the study to join up the wildlife corridors and provide more assistance along the Tarsheds burn. The land to the east has been designated in the wildlife corridors network, and we'll come on to this later, for its biodiversity value. And there is clearly the opportunity to provide wider measures suggested in the Greenbelt study. These include planting along the Tarsheds burn towards the River Don, and obviously the enhancement of the public rights-of-way network, as Mr. Thompson has suggested, enhancements to the West Farm Meadows site of special scientific interest as well. So those potentials we don't feel are sufficiently spelled out in the key considerations. And the modification, to the Statement of Common Ground in terms of the exploring opportunities to renaturalise the watercourse is modified to say within the GA2 allocation boundary. Now this is for land ownership purposes, but it's against the spirit of what is suggested by the Greenbelt study, and I would submit by the planning policy guidance, that if you're going to take a site out for exceptional circumstances, you should be looking to compensatory improvements to the wider Greenbelt area.
Thank you. I'm clear on respective positions in relation to Greenbelt harm, so I'll come to a view on that, but I would like to just explore this issue of compensatory improvements a bit further and the points that are being made now and in representations. So we take the Greenbelt review study evidence. I think there's various things that are potential enhancement measures that are identified, potential mitigation measures. The Council set out in its statement a number of those, and they are embedded within the kind of key considerations for this site. Is it fair, in terms of what I'm being told, that those kind of key considerations and potential improvements are all within site GA, or would be delivered within site GA2, therefore not on Greenbelt land as a result of this plan?
Yeah, I think the ones that have been sort of identified do relate more specifically to GA2. I think it's worth noting that the Appendix C, it's not a prescriptive list of measures which must be sort of implemented in terms of each site coming forward. The appendix is quite clear that it says potential mitigation measures throughout. I think obviously in terms of the policy and what's been identified, I think there is an element of what can effectively be delivered in terms of the element of control of where those mitigation measures could be in terms of what we've included within the key considerations themselves. But again, I would refer back to the supporting text to the policy, which does lean into sort of wider mitigation measures, which could be options and considered at a plan application stage, which does sort of mention opportunities for cycle route improvements, green infrastructure improvements as well throughout the surrounding green belt.
Thank you. I mean, I think the point that's being put to me, particularly by the East Boldon and Clevedon Labour Party, is when we look at paragraph 142 of the National Planning Policy Framework, it talks about setting out ways in which the impact of removing from land from the Greenbelt can be offset through compensatory improvements to the environmental quality and accessibility of remaining Greenbelt land. So there's clearly land that's not, would remain as Greenbelt. I take the point that the Greenbelt Review kind of set out potential options and a menu of things. I think Mr. Lammy saying, you know, there's an effective, what can effectively be delivered. I don't know if you can say any more about whether some of the wider things that were considered in terms of potential mitigation or potential enhancement measures in terms of the wider, it talks about enhancements excuse me, to West Farm Meadow, which I understand is a local wildlife site. Biodiversity enhancements to land to the east of the site. Perhaps why they haven't kind of flowed through into the plan itself.
I think in particular with regard to the site opposite the proposed allocation, obviously that is in private ownership, so in terms of deliverability of mitigation measures on that site, there may be difficulties in doing that. With regard to West Farm Meadows, I would have to liaise with our National Environment Manager in terms of whether that was in council ownership and whether that is something where potentially there could be improvements, but we'd have to take that away.
Okay, and in terms of the council's referred me a couple of times now to paragraph 517 and saying, you know, there could be other ways of dealing with compensatory improvements, and this could, you know, come in at part of the planning application stage in terms of the kind of reasonable prospect of, you know, are there strategies, plans in terms of green infrastructure or walking, cycling, implementation strategies that a scheme could reasonably look to in terms of compensatory improvements?
Yes, so the South Tyneside Green and Blue Infrastructure Strategy does identify potential projects throughout the borough which could lend itself to offering compensatory improvements. I know we also have a local walking and cycling strategy as well, which I'm sure the other colleagues will be able to speak about in a bit more detail. But again, that offers opportunities for improvements across the Greenbelt as well in terms of enhancing that infrastructure.
I suspect others around the table would like to see a main modification that had a bit more kind of detail around this. I don't know if the evidence would exist for that or whether there are potential benefits from the council's view about maintaining some degree of flexibility as to what kind of compensatory improvements could comprise.
I understand the point you're making here with respect to the wording of the policy and the requirements of paragraph 142. So what I'd like to do is have the opportunity to discuss that with the council to see, with respect to the various schemes and projects and land ownership issues surrounding this within the Greenbelt, whether we can modify the policy to bring a bit more clarity to that issue. So that at development management stage, there is the capacity actually to require those improvements.
Thank you for that. Noted. Mr. Butler or Mr. Thompson, who's going first? Mr. Butler.
Welcome that comment from the council. I think it's imperative that if this policy is going to work, that the important elements on compensatory improvements in the Greenbelt study and, as Mr. Salam has just said, in the Green and Blue Infrastructure Strategy are followed up in terms of if we are to see releases of land from the Greenbelt on exceptional circumstances, not just this site but across the South Tyneside Greenbelt. And I would also point out that the Church Commissioners are one of the largest landowners across this Greenbelt area, and there is plenty of opportunity for the discussions between the council and themselves over the other landownings they have to bring in compensatory improvements.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, please.
Thank you. Just a very quick point. I know this might not be specific to the Greenbelt, but it just seems from a layperson's point of view, if this site is covered, 2/3 of it is covered by the wildlife corridor, how can off-site compensation really address that issue?
I think in terms of what we're discussing now, Mr. Thompson, it's about the impact on the green belt rather than biodiversity per se. So it's the the openness and other purposes. But we will come back to biodiversity. Can I hear from Ms. Hampson, and then we'll come back to the council, please.
Just responding to that point, the Church Commissioners are committed to looking at other sites within the locality to include improvements and enhancements to both the Greenbelt and biodiversity net gain.
Thank you. I noted the suggestion earlier, Mr. Shadowraven, in terms of looking at this. I think that's something I would like the council to do.
I anticipated that much. And of course, one has to be aware that 142 doesn't direct one's attention to Greenbelt, which is near or next to the site in question. So there would be any number of potential projects to which the applicant's attention could be directed, and by reference also to SP7.
Thank you. I thought it was less of an issue yesterday in Felgate because there's clearly a direct opportunity. I mean, we're talking obviously about site GA2 today. It may crop up at other sessions. So I think if the council can look at this perhaps strategically, and as you say, there may be opportunities elsewhere. The Church Commissioners seem to be positively signalling there might be things that the council has got a mind to, but I think it would be helpful when we look at a number of these policies, whether there is some further detail, content that could be usefully put in to kind of have some further teeth at the development management stage.
I think we will deal with it more strategically rather than on a site-by-site basis, so we can have a consistent approach across the allocations, where particularly the allocations are, as it were, self-contained.
No, that's helpful. I appreciate when we're looking at a number of sites, they're relatively, they're of a certain scale, relatively modest scale in overall terms, that reflect land ownerships. Yes, I think thinking about the overall extent of the Greenbelt as well in South Tyneside. To my mind, that seems to lean into more of a strategic approach rather than necessarily, because I understand the Greenbelt study is referred to land under Mr. Woff's client's control, and I think we have to be realistic about implementation and delivery if that site is not available for those purposes.
Inevitably, if it's to be treated on that basis, then it may be more appropriate not to look at the allocations themselves, but SP7, the strengthening SP7, which will be applicable at development management stage. But we can think about that.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. I noted you sort of initially said, I think welcome the council having a further look at this. My assurance to you in terms of if they come up with something further, I will be taking a view as to whether I'll invite people to comment on whatever the outcome of that process is, either whilst we're sitting in examination hearings, or if we get to the stage of proposed main modifications. To my mind, this will be in a main modification territory. There will then be an opportunity for everybody to comment on whether the council's suggestion, to want of a better phrase, fixes the issue. Everybody will be given an opportunity to comment at that stage.
Thank you, sir. If it's helpful, I'll be making the same representations tomorrow on site GA4, also in the ownership of the Church Commissioners.
Mr. Waff, please.
Thank you, sir. But I think it's appropriate to mention, albeit the land to the east, that it was put forward by Bellway Homes in March 2024 that their site has the ability, clearly subject to allocation, to provide compensatory improvements with the land to the north, which is in flood zones 2 and 3.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on in terms of the agenda. Thank you for those contributions. I note the action point from the council that they're going to look into. That's helpful. Thank you. But moving to item 3, it relates to my MIQ 531. And again, it's looking at Greenbelt releases in exceptional circumstances, that any alterations and release of land is well related to or can be well served by a variety of transport, including public transport. And I invite comments, submissions at this stage about how well this particular site, proposed site, is in terms of its relationship to facilities in East Boldon, and whether the site is well served by public transport. If I can turn to the council first, please, and it's picking up my MIQ 531. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, the site is well related to services and facilities in East Boldon. Firstly, dealing with retail services. There are 3 clusters of retail and other community services within East Boldon. So these are at Front Street, St Bede's, which is otherwise known as Black's Corner, and Station Terrace / Langholm Road. And the first 2 designations are identified as local neighbourhood hubs in the local plan, and Station Terrace Langholm Road is designated as a local centre, and that reflects the evidence from the retail study, in particular the local centres and neighbourhood hubs commentary and recommendations, which is the MP5. And in terms of that study, it really emphasised that the local centre performed very, very well. It conducted a health check. So we feel that it's got very strong attributes in terms of proximity to those kind of community services and retail provision. In terms of active travel opportunities, Appendix 8 of the Infrastructure Delivery Plan identifies both an existing travel and a proposed active travel route close to the site. So moving on to public transport, the site is well served by bus routes, and it's approximately 1 kilometre from East Boldon Metro Station. So we feel this is a really important attribute of the site. It's within walking distance and on a bus route, linking it to the metro line. And Table 4, the Council's response to MIQ 5.31 provides details of bus services. Thank you.
And I see from the Council's map 5 in its statement and observed on site, so there are bus routes going along New Road to the north and some along Boker Lane as well. Mr. Mayle?
Yes, sir. I'm just going to reiterate the point that the Council has got an adopted local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. We've worked with local communities on formulating that plan. It was adopted in 2021. And we've got a number of cycle routes in and around the site that we would like to bring forward, namely the 184 that runs sort of through the villages. We appreciate that this carriageway is indeed residential bound, but that said, we would like to think there's a real opportunity to build synergy between the Solent area and indeed facilitating links into the Tesco's roundabout and then accessibility into the Gateshead and Newcastle wider areas. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. I can turn to Mr. Thompson first for the forum, please.
Thank you very much. Just picking up a couple of points there. Firstly, the distance from the site to the shopping facilities. The main shopping facilities are located in Langham Road, next to the metro station. And whilst it probably is 1 kilometre as the crow flies, the actual travel distance from the bottom of the site will be much, much greater. It requires, if you're walking along lit footpaths, a journey that would take you south to the Front Street. You would have to walk along Front Street till you hit Whitburn Road. Then you would have to walk down Whitburn Road to the shops. This is a convoluted route. The point about access using public right-of-ways, we deal with a little later in the agenda, but I just want to touch on that now. The route from the bottom of the site, the north end of the site, to Tile Sheds Crossing, where a public right-of-way begins, a cycleway begins, is extremely dangerous. It's an 800 wide footpath, and all of the cyclists in this area reported incidents around safety. So there would be a need to upgrade that. The condition of the public right-of-way, the cycleway that runs parallel to the metro line from the crossing to the metro station is in a deplorable and dangerous condition. To talk about a cycleway along the 184 is fanciful, really. There is not enough space for a safe cycle lane. The traffic along that route is horrendous. And when we've talked to the council about this issue, it's well recognised that for cyclists coming through East Boldon, it is a very, very dangerous area. In our submission to Regulation 19, we included information regarding the impact of policies on East Boldon. Health services are in Boldon Colliery, and the background papers indicate there's little opportunities for for facilities in the village. The metro station car park is over capacity. It's a significant problem for local businesses and residents. The council has failed to properly identify how this issue can be resolved. Cars are left for long periods in residential streets, and the parking in Clean Lane for the industrial park is clogged with commuter vehicles. A car park extension at the metro station is identified in the investment development plan and is considered a desirable priority. It requires a feasibility study. It's earmarked for £1 million in terms of funding, with an indicative phasing of 2035. However, East Boldon Neighbourhood Forum questioned the feasibility of this proposal. The council failed to deal with the matter as part of the planning process for the 202 houses at Cleedon Lane, in part because of the difficulty in finding appropriate land. And finally, sir, the bus routes are good for this site. The problem is the bus service isn't. There's an hourly service which goes down to 2 hours that links this area to the metro station. And the reality of the situation is most people who live in the village and beyond drive to the shops. Parking, the council are aware that they've had recent intervention to try and resolve this situation, and it is extremely difficult. The prospect of another 200 and odd houses coming forward will only make matters much worse. Thank you.
Mr. Butler.
Thank you, sir. The phrase is well served by public transport. Map 5 shows lots of bus stops. The table 4 shows the service. One of the key services through the village from the complex here at Boldon through to South Shields is the number 30. That service has been reduced to an hourly service in recent years from a half-hourly service. If we are talking about the ability of new residents for this development being able to access the post office on Front Street, the convenience store there, or perhaps more importantly, the chemist and the larger supermarket at Station Terrace, or wishing to link up with the metro, as Mr. Thompson has indicated, this is not going to be an easy task if you don't have a car and you're going to be living on that estate. The issue of the metro car park was raised last week on 2 occasions by representatives of Bellway. This car park has been an issue for East Boldon for many, many years, and despite the lobbying of local Labour councillors with Nexus over that period, the inability to find an answer to a car park that's been at capacity, that spills over into residential streets and into the Clevedon Lane industrial estate area, is a severe problem that has failed to be resolved. During the preparations for the neighbourhood plan, when we were considering the impact of the failure of the metro car park, we had discussions with Nexus about the possibility of a small bus, minibus service that could run from 2 hubs. It could run from Clevedon East Boldon Library along Front Street and down Station Road and terminate at the metro station. This is something I think that with new technology, we used to talk about dial-a-ride services in many towns and villages. New technology with apps, etc., could be a viable service. So if we're looking to develop a site such as this, and you are minded to improve it, we really need to see big improvements in public transport provision for places like East Boldon. If not, the amount of car ownership that will be generated by a site like this will further clog the roads, and we're going to come on to the issue of the road junctions later. So intervention in terms of making public transport more attractive to those future residents is essential in our view.
Thank you. Mr. Mail, in terms of the issues that are raised there, please.
Thank you, sir. I think, as I said yesterday, I think it's important to raise, in terms of public transport, that there's a strong desire within the North East Combined Authority to take over the control of the bus industry, and indeed the representations just made there regarding demand responsive transport are something that, as a council, we haven't got an ability to bring forward such services under the current deregulated market. I think the desire of the North East Mayor, which is supported by South Tyneside Council, would in fact allow us to make key decisions of this ilk. But again, I think it's important to raise that in any likelihood of a plan application coming forward, we would probably foresee the need in a transport assessment being undertaken, and those respective requests, such as improved public transport, could be probably considered. Just to reiterate the point that I made earlier, I wasn't reflecting on the 184 being a desired cycle corridor. It was the interconnectivity. It's a residential bound carriageway. The desire would be to make improvements on Gordon Drive, South Lane, to then connect to the wider routing. So apologies for not that clarification earlier, but thanks, sir. Cheers.
Mr. Clifford, please.
I'd just like to add to what I said previously, point out, I mentioned where there are clusters of retail activity and services within pretty much the immediate vicinity or close vicinity of the site. There's also individual shops, there's a library, I think there's a pub, so local residents would, in the immediate, and you'll be able to see this for yourself when you visit the site. There are facilities very close to the site.
Thank you. Again, I think this will be a matter for my assessment. Visiting the site will take into account some of the issues that have been raised this morning when I go back to kind of look at some of the quality of these connections. But I think I'm clear on respective positions on this. Mr. Mayo, is it something further?
Yeah, it was just to provide further clarification. The current car park that adjoins East Boldon Metro Station is an asset of Network Rail. I think we have, over the years, have campaigned alongside Nexus to see a sizable increase in that car park provision. I think the rationale as to why that hasn't come forward has been private land ownership around the particular site. And I think that there has been various representations over the years to try and make this happen. Again, I think we would advocate the need to improve that car parking facility, but again, it's not a council asset at this moment in time. Thanks.
Thank you. I see it is identified in the council's infrastructure delivery plan, and I think it's been referred to me where that kind of sits in that process. I mean, you mentioned a moment ago, Mr. Mayo, if this site was allocated, then subsequently be a planning application, a transport assessment with the metro and connectivity to the metro potentially be part of that assessment process?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to item 4 in terms of sort of brought a number of things together as under the umbrella of achieving a well-designed place. I think it's understanding the ability of policy GA2 to work in tandem with the East Boldon Neighbourhood Plan and the separately published East Boldon Design Guide. This was my MIQ 3.2, and I think just an understanding. Policy obviously requires having regard to these two separate documents. If this plan is found sound and adopted, it doesn't take away that there will still be a neighbourhood plan and a design guide. And is that an effective approach, or does there need to be more detail within policy SP7 at GA2 that picks up design matters or some of the matters that are already contained within the neighbourhood plan or the design guide? If I can ask the council first in terms of its response to my MIQ 5.32, I don't think there's any sort of proposed modifications, and that kind of cross-reference to the neighbourhood plan and design guide is sufficient.
No, so there was no proposed modifications to that part of the policy. The council are confident that the local plan is clear that development proposals in neighbourhood plan areas should be informed by the neighbourhood plans. So that's set out in paragraph 110 of the local plan, and then reiterated again in policy SP1 criterion 3. And as you mentioned, it's also one of the key considerations of policy GA2.
Thank you. I think I've read from the Church Commissioner's statement, there's no objection or concern about having this reference back, having regard to the neighbourhood plan and design guide.
No, we welcome the inclusion of it in the policy, and likewise we don't think specific design elements from that need to be duplicated in the policy for the plan to be found sound.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson, and then Mr. Butler, or Mr. Butler and then Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, sir. Achieving well-designed places is something that really is dear to the hearts of the East Boldon Forum and all of those who support it. It is absolutely critical, in our opinion, for the neighbourhood plan and its design guide to be highlighted as a site requirement. And we're grateful for our planning colleagues to actually put it within the body of the draft local plan. The impact of the neighbourhood plan can have a really important effect in delivering good design, and we've seen that. I don't know if Mr. Horseman is with us today. Yes, he is. And he was able to use the neighbourhood plan to very good effect in the early stages of the Cleedon Lane design. However, anything within the draft plan that improves the prospect of good design has got to be welcomed. And we've made several comments on policy matters as part of our response to the council in how the plan could be improved. I just want to talk about the difficulty in achieving good design. It's something very, very dear to my heart. The big problem that we have at the minute is the council continues to fail its housing delivery test, and there is this issue of I forget the term, but where schemes are put forward, many of the policies have to be put one side. What's the mark, Mr. Butler? Presumption in favour. Thank you very much. And that is used by developers to undermine the effect of the neighbourhood plan. It's used to undermine many of the policies within the existing framework. So anything that we can do to address that has got to be welcomed. And if this comes through and the neighbourhood plan is there, we will work with our colleagues with the idea of achieving good design in mind. The big problem that we've got, though, and it comes to capacity, is the issue of the impact on other parts of the village. This site can't be seen in glorious isolation. Its development has a massive impact on the other parts of East Boldon village, and we just can't brush that under the carpet. Yes, we can achieve within the periphery of the site those aims, hopefully we can, but the impact of the traffic and the way services will be accessed, the impact on schools and other things that I know we'll come on to, just can't be magicked away. These numbers will have a profound effect on the lives of people, especially those who live in houses along the A184, Front Street as we call it locally. But nevertheless, we are grateful, and we do hope that you're able to support the aims of the council in supporting the neighbourhood plan. Thank you.
Mr. Butler.
Yes, thank you, sir. I think from Regulation 18 to Regulation 19, we've seen a strengthening of the relationship between the proposed local plan and the neighbourhood plan, following representations made by East Boldon Neighbourhood Forum. And I think that is vital. As Mr. Thompson has said, we started a process with the developers at Cleedon Lane where they made a submission without any reference to a made neighbourhood plan. The inability of the development industry to understand the importance of a neighbourhood plan and its design guide took a lot of effort from our point of view. So it is vital that if this site comes forward, that it's assessed by council officers in relation to the East Boldon Design Code and in relation to the detailed policies in the East Boldon Neighbourhood Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And the site itself is allocated for an indicative kind of capacity of 263 dwellings. The second part of my item 4 agenda is about the capacity of the site to sustainably accommodate 263 dwellings from a kind of a character or design perspective. So we're kind of jumping slightly to my MIQ 539. and perhaps invite the council at this stage as to how it's looked at arriving at that capacity. I'd reference the site frameworks evidence, and obviously through the strategic housing land availability assessment as well. Is it Ms. Cooper?
Yeah, so as we discussed last week, I think it was, the site capacity as a starting point was based on the SHLA methodology of a 75% net developable area and 35 dwellings per hectare based on the location of the site. And that's been sort of supported through the vision and work that the site promoters have submitted throughout the local plan process. The site frameworks document sets out the sort of key constraints on the site, such as the existing hedgerows, the small watercourse on the site, and it just sort of demonstrates that they can be mitigated within the site while retaining that development capacity. And sorry, that 35 dwellings per hectare is sort of in keeping with the surrounding area as well.
Thank you. If I can just come to either the Neighbourhood Forum or the Labour Party on this particular point. It was my MIQ 539 in terms of the capacity of this site. Were this site to go forward into a plan that I consider would be sound. I appreciate, Mr. Thompson, you sort of invited me in sort of two steps. One, not to include this site, but a kind of an alternative of a smaller parcel. I understand as a consequence of that would be it'd be less than 263 dwellings.
Yes, thank you. The effect on the wildlife corridor, of course, is probably one of the most important aspects of this. But then the numbers that affect the rest of the village, as I've tried to outline, is of such significance that you know, we honestly believe the capacity of this site should be reduced and land made available for true compensation. You know, not in some other area of the borough, but in a way that compensates. I know this might not be a legal requirement, but does compensate people who live and enjoy the village for the loss of that land. It really is such an insult to people to say, you know, everything will be all right, we'll compensate for the loss of greenbelt by doing some planting in heaven. It really is very upsetting. So yes, we would strongly urge you, if you minded, for this site to come forward to consider our representation in terms of reducing the area and limiting the numbers. And, you know, as far as site density is concerned, a lot of that depends upon the type of and form of the building that we go forward with. We make the case elsewhere on this agenda for housing for elderly. You know, a three-storey block for people who are retired offers the means of increasing the density without loss of public space, without loss of planting, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butler.
Thank you, sir. Yes, for the reasons outlined by Mr. Thompson and the forum, the Labour Party would agree, if you are minded to approve this allocation, it should be on a much reduced site area. And you've heard the evidence as to how that could be achieved, taking out the northern one-third of the site. And I'd echo the points made about what type of development would then occur on the remainder of the site as to whether the number of units would be reduced. We noticed from the viability study that a standard suggestion of medium and larger scale dwellings is the one that's been judged for viability. However, there will have to be 25% at least affordable housing, which we'll come on to, and those units would be smaller. So there is the ability for any developer to come up with a scheme that would have much less impact and would not mean the release of so much land.
Thank you. I can obviously go back through the evidence. Can the council remind me, was this site allocation through the strategic housing land availability assessment presented as one site, or was it presented as two separate individual parcels?
Just the allocation?
Yeah.
That was just one site.
One site. Okay. Thank you. Well, I'll take a view on what I've heard and in relation to the capacity of the site and the wider issues. Obviously, the northern parcel I felt was necessary to come out for soundness, and I'm not saying I do at this stage. Obviously, I understand that would have an implication on the overall capacity of what this site could deliver. I don't think there's an alternative of 263 could be reasonably accommodated on the remaining balance. So I think from all the evidence, it's the whole site is needed to achieve those housing numbers. Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to, at this stage, before we get into matter 5, I think probably a convenient point to take a mid-morning adjournment before we come back to infrastructure, as I'm sure there's plenty to say on item 5. I'm going to advocate a slightly shorter mid-morning break because there's kind of less of us here today. If we can be back at this room for 11:30. Thank you, and I'll resume the hearing session. Thank you. Okay, it's coming up to 11:30, so it's time for me to resume these hearing sessions, please. We're back onto the agenda for this site at Land at North Farm at East Boldon, and item 5. And this picks up a couple of my MIQ questions. The first I want to deal with is probably more around social infrastructure at MI 534. And my sort of question to the council and others at that time is there are no kind of social or other infrastructure kind of considerations, requirements identified in the policy itself, whether that's a justified approach or whether the council's identified through its wider evidence base there are issues that need to be addressed. We recognise that. It's identified in the infrastructure delivery plan, and the normal approach presumably would be around, you know, section 106 contributions where required. Mr. Clifford.
Thank you, sir. There are social infrastructure implications, as has quite rightly been referenced at the other side of the table from this development, but we feel they can be dealt with through the standard development management approach, section 106 contributions. In terms of what those implications are, well, firstly, regarding primary school places, the assessment in the infrastructure delivery plan has identified that West Boldon Primary School and Whitburn Primary School could be appropriately extended to accommodate the impacts. And I will point out that West Boldon Primary School is highly accessible from the proposed allocation. I acknowledge that these distances are as the crow flies, but it's approximately 650 metres from the western boundary of the site and 900 metres from the eastern boundary. And regarding secondary school places, the assessment shows that Boldon Secondary School has the potential to accommodate pupils from the residential development in the area. So I feel that we acknowledge there are social infrastructure implications, but they can be addressed through the relevant development management policies.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson next, please.
Just a quick question, sir. Would the officer confirm that he's putting forward Whitburn Primary School as a means of satisfying the extra numbers from this site?
Thank you, Mr. Clifford. I mean, is this because there's kind of schools are kind of, or catchments are grouped by a particular area?
Yeah, it's been assessed on an area basis. So, I mean, the way in which primary schools are, primary school need is assessed. It's divided into 6 areas. And this is area 6, which is the villages. So it's assessed on an area basis. So it's the cumulative requirement from all of the allocations in that area. Obviously, first and foremost, given its proximity, I would imagine West Boldon Primary School will play the lead role. I would also just add to what I said that there are specific policies in the plan which cater for, which address the development management requirements. So, for example, you have policy SP25, which is infrastructure, and policy 59, which is delivering infrastructure, policy 60, developer contributions, and policy 50, social and community infrastructure. So when you look at the plan as a whole, we feel a strong policy basis for addressing impacts.
Thank you. Before I bring others in, Mr. Clifford, just to kind of complete the circle, does the infrastructure delivery plan identify some of these potential solutions that you referred to, particularly in terms of, say, West Boldon Primary School? Does that have a scheme or a project in there?
It doesn't have a specific project, but it does identify the need. It is referenced within the education section. There is at the end of the education section of the infrastructure delivery plan, there's a delivery section, if you like, which references sites to where capacity can be provided. So there are schools that can actually accommodate the demand. It's drilled down to that level.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson again, please, and then Mr. Butler.
Thank you very much, sir. Can I just say, first of all, Whitburn Primary School, as the crow flies, is 3 miles away from this site. The infant school that currently exists in East Boldon Village is at capacity. It's a Victorian building and there isn't any room at all for its expansion. Many of the residents who spoke to us as part of the neighbourhood forum consultation highlighted the value of its schools. The infant school, the nursery school and the primary school, the junior school, are all outstanding, and it's one of the reasons given why people want to live in the village area. And that is probably why they're so concerned about these numbers and the uncertainty of the authority as it deals with this issue. You know, we don't know if West Boldon's primary school, which is a class building of many years, is suitable for expansion. We haven't seen a feasibility study to demonstrate its capacity. To think that people might have a child at East Boldon Junior School and then have to take another sibling across to Whitburn at the same time is just not a sensible way to proceed. From the earlier consultations, the requirements for school places has almost doubled. The primary school places in the Boldon area is now identified as almost one form entry. That is to say 210 additional places that are required. So, you know, these numbers and the uncertainty around how the authority will proceed could precipitate a major restructuring of the education officer within the forum area. And it's something that people are desperately worried about. It's something that causes people real concern who have 2, 3 and 4 children. Juggling that is very difficult. But above all, the value of these existing schools are really important to the whole community, really. And we, in fairness to people, we need to understand what the implication of this site coming forward is as far as education's concerned. There are real concerns around this issue, sir.
Mr. Butler, please.
Thank you, sir. Yes, the Labour Party shares those very strong concerns given by Mr. Thompson there. We're looking at the moment at this particular site, the Cleedon Lane site subject to appeal, and another site, small brownfield site coming along, that would amount to 733 new homes when you take into account the allocation GA4 at Moor Lane, Cleedon. The IDP 25 only produced since the plan has been brought forward to examination, sees a doubling in the number of additional primary places compared with the IDP 23 submitted for the Regulation 19 plan. There's clearly been a reassessment based on the area of the villages that the need for primary places is going to be severe relating to these housing developments. And to suggest to the community of East Boldon that Whitburn Primary School is a suitable alternative for their children is just not practical in our view. As we see, West Boldon is being suggested, not East Boldon itself. And obviously we would want to examine with the local education authority how this would play out in practice, and obviously discuss with our colleagues in the Boldon Colliery ward where this school is located. So from those points of view, we have grave concerns about the impact on school places, and the community has long seen that as one of the major elements of concern relating to additional housing in the village. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the council able to advise, I mean, presumably in this area, Mr Clifford, South Tyneside as a unitary authority has the local education authority responsibility, so do you have colleagues who are kind of pupil forecasting and working through what that could mean and where additional capacity might be required?
Yes, sir. I'd like to respond to a couple of points, but I'll deal with your question first. We do work with School Places Planning Manager. We liaise very closely, and the School Places Planning Manager provided the forecasting work, not just obviously for this site, but for the whole local plan demand. There's a couple of other points I'd like to respond to. Firstly, we're not advocating that Whitburn School is necessarily the solution. As I've stated, it's been looked at on an area basis. That's how, obviously in practical terms, just to reiterate, first and foremost, the school that's closest would be, we would envisage playing the principal role in relation to this site. Secondly, in respect of feasibility, the council has done high-level feasibility work, and where we're referencing schools are capable of being extended, that is informed by that work.
Thank you. Mr Butler again, please.
Thank you, sir. Relating to other facilities, we've made a comment in our submission about the strain on the health facilities which serve East Boldon. The GP practices are located in Boldon Colliery. There are no GP practices in East Boldon itself. And we pointed out that the strain over the last 2 years led to one GP surgery temporarily closing its doors to new patients. We note in the IDP that there is the recognised difficulties over consultation rooms as the way that they assess primary health care need, and this is something that we believe needs far more attention if we are to see any new housing in the villages.
Thank you. Be clear from the position of the local Labour Party and the East Boldon Neighbourhood Forum. Again, coming back to what may need to be modified in the plan, is your sort of starting point. The infrastructure capacity is not there at the moment. or likely to come forward that these sites again should be removed from the plan, or if that they go in and remain in the plan, there needs to be more policy content specific to this site, specific to Boldon, as opposed to what the council's telling me, that there's a number of policies in the plan that would also apply to this site in terms of education, health and other requirements. Is that the way I should be looking at things?
Yeah, well, that's the case. The point I'm probably making very badly is the fact that to ordinary people there isn't any clarity in the implications here. You know, we were led to believe at Regulation 18 and 19 a certain number of school places would be required, which led people to worry. But now, at a very late hour, we see almost a doubling of those figures. And, you know, people need to be reassured. People chose to live in East Boldon because of the schools. And if there are fundamental changes to that education offer, those people need to understand exactly what it is. It isn't beyond the realms of the authority to look at West Boldon Primary School and decide its capacity and whether it can offer, you know, a nursery extension, a junior school extension. But again, it runs through a lot of the issues that we're talking about today. There is this uncertainty and lack of clarity, which is very worrying, to be honest. Thank you.
Mr. Butler.
Thank you, sir. Clearly, the starting point of Clean East Boldon Labour Party is that the impact of this site and, in addition, the likely development of the Cleedon Lane estate is that the infrastructure demands, we're going to come on to traffic in a minute, would mean the impact would be so severe on this village that we would not want to see the allocations in place. However, we have to consider that you may allocate the site, and in doing so we are trying to show to you that we don't believe should an application come forward immediately after you allocated this site, that the council has the ability to react in terms of these facilities. The viability study suggests that the developer would contribute around £1.3 million towards education in the Section 106 agreement. We have the same issue with the Cleedon Lane developer. How is that money going to be used? Is it going to be used to put temporary classrooms on a primary school site? Or are we talking about proper redevelopment of our older schools? And so these are key issues that have to be addressed if we're going to see exceptional circumstances position taken with land taken out of Greenbelt around our villages. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to move on to other aspects of infrastructure, and the second area under item 5 was impacts on the road network. I'll include nearby level crossings. I think that was a specific reference to Network Rail, and the council's responded to that. In terms of the wider road network, various things have been identified to me or brought to my attention through various representations. I think not least in relation to this site, the Boca Lane Front Street junction on the A184. I think in the first instance, I mean, I don't know if the council wishes to add anything to what's already before me in terms of the infrastructure delivery plan, which identifies a number of, I'll call them off-site highway improvement works, whether there's anything that could be said in relation to the timing and delivery, particularly of the Boca Lane, of any sort of Boca Lane Front Street improvements.
So the timing and delivery will depend on when we receive the planning application and how that is responded to. I can only really reiterate what we've already stated, that the local road network assessment has identified which junctions would need to be mitigated, and there's a high-level assessment of the mitigation necessary.
Thank you, and that's fed into the infrastructure delivery plan.
Yes, sir, that's reflected in the infrastructure delivery plan.
Thank you. If I come to the local community then, in terms of, I think very clear from your representations from the forum, Mr. Thompson.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. This is probably the most important thing I can talk about this morning, and I feel a great weight of responsibility here. I just need to explain a little bit about East Boldon. You've said, sir, that you've visited it. You'll have seen that the 184, or as we call it, Front Street, runs through the length of the old village. It's not a dual carriageway. Traffic comes down to two lanes. It runs through houses, schools, shops, pubs, churches that are built up hard against the highway. It's a Victorian inner core. So the traffic that will result from the figures that Mr. Butler talked about, the combined numbers, will have a huge effect on the people who live, who work, who go to school there, who pray there, and like Mr. Hutchison, who goes to the pub there. So our chairperson, who is a practicing GP and can't be with us today because of work commitment, really wanted me to point out the effects of noise, the effects of air quality on the health of people who live in our village, especially young children, especially those with respiratory conditions. So that is what we've got to contend with. If I can turn to the 2023 Traffic Assessment Local Plan Report, it broadly deals with the Boldons in addressing the A184, the road that I've just mentioned, and then it looks separately at New Road. The three junctions that sort of affect the Boldons, starting at West Boldon, is at the Hilton Lane junction, and then the Boker Lane junction that leads to the proposed site, and then the Whitburn Road junction, or Black's Corner as it's known locally. These are numbered 20, 21 and 22 in the Traffic Assessment Local Plan. The modelling indicates that there's already queuing to some extent at each junction, and highlights that the additional numbers will require mitigation. Now, I find traffic assessment reports extremely difficult to read, but my reading of it suggests that they feel that normal improvements are extremely difficult to mitigate. And what they do is they set out a whole range of possibilities, and I use possibilities in a very deliberate way, that would try and address these additional numbers and deal with the additional queuing that would result. But before I actually address that, the queuing issue, it is not just about the delay to drivers. It is not just about how long someone will sit in the car waiting to get through the village. Because of the structure of the village that I've explained, it has an impact on the people who live there. So that is important to remember as we talk about this. But the mitigation measures that are discussed in the Traffic Assessment Local Plan seem to revolve around trying to slow everything down so that access from side roads can be achieved. They talk about the introduction of a 20-mile-an-hour zone, public realm improvements, pedestrian crossings, and small and large-scale sustainability transport improvements. It also says that there may still be a requirement for local or wider sustainability transport improvements that might include a park and ride car park extension at Boldon. And we know that the latest infrastructure delivery plan includes a possible work to provide that, which we talked about earlier. But the mitigation measures also talk about, addressing these queuing situations by encouraging home working, providing fast broadband, and the provision of offices within new dwellings. It also talks about restricting parking provision, and it also talks about providing cycle parking and ensuring development encourages sustainable travel, particularly to local facilities through their design, something that we also talked about earlier. Now, perhaps apart from restricting parking provision, all of these measures are laudable, and the neighbourhood plan supports them. But to believe that these measures will actually deliver effective outcomes that will make the people's lives who live along the 184 bearable, I think is at best fanciful. But to say that you're going to restrict parking in a village setting would just lead to absolute chaos. And it's a concept, I think, that's been, dismissed. I remember Pickles in Parliament talking about, this concept as being nonsensical, and that new developments that had come forward with that concept would just end in chaos with people parking on footpaths and so on. So that's the 184, these three junctions, and if I turn now to the new road situation, the traffic assessment local plan report looks at junction 2, and that's the junction, the intersection of Boker Lane and New Road, where it does recognise that improvements can be made, physical improvements can be made, and I think a budget of £300,000 has been included for that. It looks at the mini roundabout at the tile shed end of New Road, and in spite of their drawings indicating queuing, it doesn't identify any work that's necessary, which to people who live in the area find it immensely strange, because it's probably one of the most dangerous mini roundabouts that exists in the whole authority. However, the report does not study the implication of a further junction between these two, and that is the access proposed into the site from North Road. And it seems to be a real missed opportunity to give evidence to everyone concerned with this of how it might work. But clearly, if we do introduce a junction between these 2 points, there's major consideration. Will it be a mini roundabout? Will it be traffic lights? What will that do to queuing at these junctions? And will that impact on the crossings at tile sheds? So a lot of ideas put forward, but none that we can see will really affect the village. The Infrastructure Delivery Plan 2025 does contain budgets. The New Road Boker Lane junction that I've just talked about does have the £300,000 included. It's classed as essential work, and a feasibility study is required. The 184 Front Street Sunderland Road B1229 Station Road Junction at East Boldon, Black's Corner, as I referred to it earlier, there is a cost of £250,000. It's classed as essential. The 184 Front Street, Boker Lane Junction, the junction immediately adjacent to the site, it's classed as essential, and there's a cost of £500,000. The A184 Hilton Road Junction at West Boldon, there's a budget of £750,000, and that's classed as critical. On the one hand, we see the earlier report saying that mitigation can't actually be improved through physical improvements apart from the junction of New Road and Boker Lane. And they put forward all of these other means of trying to address the problem. And yet, the infrastructure delivery plan has all of these massive budgets in place, but there is actually no detail. Nobody's explaining to local people what this would look like in reality, how it would work, how it would impact the village. And that is really important. It's a really important omission. The Council's 2025 Infrastructure Delivery Plan also has an allocation for a car park extension at East Boldon Metro Station, which we've talked about. £1 million is identified for that. It's classed as desirable, but again, there is no detail whatsoever.
Okay, Mr. Thompson, quite a bit there you've been through. I understand it's a significant issue.
Yes, I do apologise.
I
think I could put a glass eye to sleep on this matter, but I just feel it's so important to try and make the point, so I do apologise.
Please don't. I mean, this is a significant, serious matters we're talking about, so it's important that I hear and understand what communities are telling me. Just again, coming back to where I may need to take things and what you would like me to sort of come away from this with, is your submission, Mr. Thompson, that the plan needs more evidence or more detail on transport highway improvements, or that what's being sort of put in the sort of the package of measures within the supporting evidence will not be sufficient, or is it a combination of the two?
I think in the first instance, it won't be effective. It won't provide measures that could allow the village to deal with these additional numbers that come forward. I think the second point is, the lack of clarity and being allowing the community to understand what is required is a major omission in my humble opinion. So they're the two main points.
Thank you. Obviously, Mr. Thompson has taken us through in quite a bit of detail there. Mr. Butler, if you may well agree with a lot of what he's said, but be particularly interested if you've got any sort of further or additional points you may wish to bring to my attention.
Thank you, sir. Yes, a comprehensive explanation really of the concerns of the community in relation to our road network and the difficulties we have. There's no doubt the traffic assessment has shown that the junctions in East Boldon are at capacity at mornings and particularly at evening peaks. And any further traffic generated by this development, by the Cleedon Lane development, and by the development of Moor Lane in Cleedon, where those drivers will undoubtedly pass through East Boldon, will exacerbate the current problems, which are fairly unique, with having a major level crossing full gated and two other level crossings partially gated in the area as well. We're at loss to see how the proposed mitigations in the traffic assessment will provide the solution, the things that Mr. Thompson's explained to you. And we're also at a loss at the moment to understand the concepts of any improvements to the key junctions that this site would serve. Monies have been allocated. Talk of the schemes being looked at in 2030. Mr. Clifford saying these would be matters for traffic assessment following a planning application. These issues just would not be sufficient as far as the community are concerned. We've had some improvements made to the traffic signalling network on the 184, some smart signalling work, but the queues are still there. Queues to Sunderland Football Club, the queues to the Sunderland Greyhound Stadium that constantly come through the village. Those matters make it very difficult for people to move around. So from those points of view, would totally echo the evidence that you've heard from the forum over those issues. Could I go on now, sir, to the level crossings themselves?
Please, yeah.
Thank you. In terms of the council's evidence, it says that the matter for the level crossings, again, would be subject to a transport assessment on any planning application. We know that for tile sheds and Benton Lane crossings, Network Rail have a proposal to bring in full barrier control for safety reasons. This has been a matter discussed with the community over the last few years. We're not clear when the funding will come forward for that. The impact of the Clevedon Lane development, should that proceed on both sets of crossings, is already a real concern for residents. To have a further impact of 263 houses on top of that for the crossings brings further concerns. So our position is that the fallback position of using policy SP26 for the dealing with the issues of the level crossings isn't sufficient, and it should be dealt with at this stage in terms of the allocation impact. And we're clear that the traffic assessment doesn't do that at all. So in summary, the council themselves say in their evidence that this site would have significant impacts on the proposed development of the highway network that require mitigation. It shows that there are 5 junctions requiring mitigation, to which this site is one of the top 5 contributors during peak periods. We have, there's no doubt that this needs to be resolved and should be resolved before any allocation is considered for this village. Just a final point, trying to get clarity over the proposed modification on the public right-of-way, which you've also mentioned, and it seems now, in terms of the statement of common ground, the position of the council is that they will agree with the church committees to contribute to the enhancement of the surrounding public right-of-way network, which we would clearly support. However, in their statement to you, they proposed a different modification, which was to enhance the public right-of-way network that runs through west to east and parallel north to south of the site. So if they are the 2 public rights-of-way that they're talking about, then I would seek clarification with the council of that. But if it's to the wider public right-of-way network as well, as suggested by the Green Infrastructure, Blue and Infrastructure study, then I would also welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see if we can sort of bring matter 5 to a conclusion today in terms of what's being put to me. Can I ask the council if I go back to the local the local highway assessment, I think it's document IMB 5, in terms of just understanding the ability and potential to kind of reduce significant impacts and the schemes that have been identified, the level of detail that is available at this stage. I appreciate this is an allocation and evidence needs to be proportionate to that, but have kind of high level kind of schemes, solutions been identified?
Yes, sir. As you rightly state, it is a high-level study. We feel it's proportionate at the plan-making stage. What it's basically setting out is a broad strategy along that corridor, and that strategy is very much consistent with the vision-led approach which we discussed yesterday. So I think it's really important to emphasise that first and foremost, with any planning application, we will be seeking to provide opportunities for modes of transport other than the private motor car. So that would be the first and foremost aspect of any strategy. But obviously, there would be other measures as well. But the actual detail to those measures would be at the planning application stage. I mean, it's been mentioned the other side of the table, for example, that the assessment didn't assess a junction which doesn't exist at the moment, you know, that might be necessary as part of a planning application. Well, I don't think a high-level plan-making study can do that. We don't know what's going to be proposed by the applicant as a specific solution in terms of access, etc. So there are some things which inevitably will come forward at the planning application stage.
Thank you. I've got in my mind to the council, obviously the National Planning Policy Framework says that things should only be sort of prevented on highway grounds if the impact, the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. So that's not saying there might be some adverse or some degree of kind of adverse effects. But I seem to recall from when we've started to look at kind of how transport assessment work has been undertaken, it's my recollection is it is, I want to sort of always want to describe it as worst case scenario, but there are potential things that could be done that could improve things like modal shift. So that what the study is identifying is this would be the sort of the extent, the sort of the highest extent of the impact, but it could be with further modelling work on an individual site basis, it could turn out to be less. Mr. Mail?
Yes, sir, I was just going to reiterate the point about sort of air quality in the area. We undertake a continuous, non-continuous and continuous monitoring in and around the area. The junctions that we assess are Boca Lane Station Road, Station Approach to where the metro station car park access is, as well as Black's Corner. We report this into DEFRA on an annual basis, and I can account that there's been no exceedances over the last 5 years at any of these junctions. So whilst there may be congestion taking place, it's certainly by no means an exceedance of air quality issues.
And just to respond to your specific point, sir, yes, I can confirm that the study did not identify impacts as being severe, and it took, if you like, a worst case scenario, and that we're confident through a vision-led approach a viable strategy can be delivered that will mitigate the impacts.
And bringing in the public rights of way, this is something that has been identified through the submitted policy in terms of enhancing, I emphasise the word surrounding public right of way network to the the proposed modification through the statement of common ground is to clarify that would be a contribution to the enhancement, because I presume some of the surrounding public right of way network is not under the control of the church commissioners. But in terms of the point that was put to me, that's, you know, is this a concern it's going to be just the public right of way on the site itself? I would have thought the wording surrounding points to something that's wider or further afield.
By the wording, sorry. Yes, sir, that is suggested by the wording.
Okay, thank you for those contributions. I'm going to reflect on what's been put to me. Is it a very brief sort of further point, Mr. Thompson, because we've still got quite a bit to cover?
Sorry, yes, very, very quickly. Just I agree with everything Mr. Butler said. I just wanted to make one further point about the level crossing. It isn't that long ago when this particular issue was identified as a real stumbling block for housing numbers in the area, and the council consulted on a road diversion and flyover. This affected tile sheds, nature reserve, and it just seems strange that, you know, we don't have any details coming forward, and people worry that, you know, is this a proposal that will come forward again? I believe the vast majority of people who responded were against the proposal, and given its effect on the environment, people are rightly concerned. The issue of pollution, we wonder if any modelling's been done where we have the numbers actually inputted, the increase in the numbers coming through. Bogle Lane is identified, the junction with Front Street, as the 7th most polluted spot in South Tyneside. So, you know, once we see these higher numbers coming through, what is the understanding of pollution at that point? Finally, the public rights of way, you know, the site is actually very, very well located for these. We've mentioned the connection to East Boldon metro station, but to the west, the site is adjacent to the River Don cycleway. That in turn connects the site to Nissan, to IAMP, and to this business park that we're holding this inspection. So that investment, you know, from the millions of pounds that the developer will make, should be allocated to alleviate, you know, the issues that we've talked about. I'll shut up for now. Thank you very much.
That's fine. Okay. There's nothing further on transport infrastructure rights of way. I've got the council's proposed modification within the statement of common ground. I'll reflect on the submissions that are made to me in terms of whether there needs to be further detail and further evidence at this stage, and I'll think about that in terms of my sort of preliminary findings in regard to what the council's told me and the work that it's undertaken. Matter 6, environmental considerations. I had a reasonably long discussion there on transport. I think if we can encourage people to make more focus or shorter contributions on the environmental aspects, appreciate we've got a number of areas to cover here. The first is around the wildlife corridor issue, and it was my MIQ 533. I understand from the council's evidence and what I was told yesterday, land that's proximate or close to watercourses has, as a matter of kind of principle and approach, been included within wildlife corridors. Are there any other specific wildlife designations at this site? I understand it is close to a SSSI, close to local wildlife sites, but are there any other than the wildlife corridor, are there any other designations at this location on the site itself?
There's nothing further to add in terms of what is on the allocation itself, but it's worth noting that the site next to it is also identified as a stepping stone site in the Wildlife Corridor Review document.
I think is that Mr. Woff's site, yeah. And in terms of, we discussed this yesterday, but in relation to this discussion, Mrs. Lamb, are wildlife corridors in themselves a kind of an areas that, you know, automatically prevent development, or is it something that needs to be taken into consideration and the detail of a scheme responds to the potential of those areas for wildlife?
Yes, so I'll refer back to the paragraph that we looked at yesterday in terms of the Wildlife Corridor Review on page 61, which identifies that development within wildlife corridors must be accompanied by appropriate mitigation in accordance with the mitigation hierarchy in the MPPF. And again, that has informed the writing of Local Plan Policy 34, which specifically sets out mitigation required for developments within the wildlife corridors within South Tyneside.
Thank you. If I can turn to, is it going to be Mr Thompson first in terms of the wildlife corridor issue, or Mr Butler?
I'll go first, sir. That will assist Mr Thompson arrest. As I said last week, in terms of the discussion we had relating to Mr Martin's comments on the East Field and Miss Rawcliffe's evidence, the Wildlife Corridor Network review undertaken by South Tyneside in conjunction with Sunderland and Gateshead brought a huge amount of clarity to the importance of the Greenbelt, South Tyneside Greenbelt, and its biodiversity value. And you've heard from Mrs Lamb that the corridor does cover a considerable part of the site, and importantly that linkage to the Tileshed burn, and indeed the other elements around the burn and the railway embankment, but most importantly the East Field in the ownership, private ownership, but Bellway's interest.
Reflection of what's deliverable and under the control of this site, and that's been put forward to me. But I'm now curious as to whether there's potential other opportunities beyond the site that mean that that modification may not be necessary.
We can explore that and just see what results from discussions with a view to providing a suggested modification.
Thank you. And in terms of the wider points that are being made by the local Labour Party and the Boldon Forum, the policy obviously contains a number of key considerations that relate to the natural environment in terms of retaining the existing trees, hedgerows, etc., landscaping. Obviously got in mind how-to, the sort of site frameworks document that shows areas for open space, etc. Can I gauge the council's view or response at this stage as to whether the policy would need any further detail or specificity around the natural environments responding to the wildlife corridor, whether any of that would be necessary for soundness, and what the implications could be were I to accept or be minded to accept what's been put to me in terms of effectively not having any built development on the northern part of the site.
I think in terms of the local plan policies that stand at the minute, I think policy 34 is very robust in terms of how wildlife corridors would be dealt with at plan application stage. Therefore, I think our sort of initial feelings are that the key considerations are sound as they are, and when taking into context the other policies within the local plan.
Mr Butler, please.
Thank you, sir. In relation to Ms Hanson's helpful intervention there, the Tileshed burn does flow northwestwards under New Road and further along to past the West Meadows SSI. So I think the Church Commissioner's interest and ownership there would link to the proposal in the green and blue infrastructure to look at further improvements along the Tileshed burn.
Thank you. I think the council's recognised or has offered to kind of look into that and clarify that a bit further, not losing sight of a wider issue around just strategic approach to compensatory improvements. I'm going to move on to flood risk, if I may, as we've been talking about the tile shed burn. It was my MOQ 537. I think the council is advising that this site is wholly within flood zone 1. Is that in terms of the developable area, or is there an issue that the tile shed burn itself is flood zone 3 and possibly has a margin of flood zone 2?
So I think there might be a higher level of flood risk immediately within Tileshed Berm. However, the approach very much acknowledges that, and it requires an appropriate buffer around the local watercourse to ensure it remains free from the development and allow maintenance activities to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Clifford. When you say in terms of avoiding that, is that in terms of wider policy requirements or something that needs to be put specifically into this part of policy SP7 for site GA2?
Sorry, sir, I apologise. I was a bit distracted there. I can just confirm actually the whole site is in flood zone 1.
Including the tile shed burn?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'll invite others. Mr. Butler and then Mr. Waff, please.
Sorry, sir. Sorry to... there's a floodplain immediately next to the tile shed burn, which will be kept free from development. Sorry, sir.
Okay. That's where I thought we were. I was kind of when looking at the Greenbelt Review mapping, it certainly seems to show an absolute constraint just in the north-east corner of the site, which I assume to reflect the tile shed burn. Obviously, that's not an area appropriate for development. I'll take a view as to whether the policies of the plan provide that or whether we need something more specific within the policy itself to just make sure of that. Mr. Butler, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that clarification for the council. It's clear in the site frameworks constraint plan that the tile sheds burn and its environments are in flood zone 2 and 3, and they have been shown as a constraint to development in that document and in other documents. These fields have been subject to surface water flooding over many years, and clearly the farmer manages that process, and you often see surface water laying both in the northwest corner and the northeast corner of the fields. So we have concerns about the site's suitability. There is a SUDS proposal being made as part of the indicative framework and was also suggested by the previous site promoters' evidence. We're not clear, though, whether other surface water retention measures may be needed, which will be expensive. We're seeing this at the moment on other developments. We saw it in a small brownfield development at Mayflower Glass, and we have a major proposal at Cleedon Lane for retention tanks, for pumping, and for, in extreme circumstances, tanker takeaway from those. So surface water retention is a major issue in this area. And obviously, you've heard the evidence relating to sewerage disposal last week. And again, we're seeking clarification as to where the sewage from this site would be disposed. We talked about whether there was a catchment area plan. Apparently, that is not in evidence. However, it would be useful to have that resolved, please.
Okay. Thank you for that. So, I mean, in terms of the approach to surface water, this site, I wouldn't be surprised to hear the council say that SUDS is the way forward for this site, that nothing abnormal or unusual is required or identified in the evidence.
That's correct, sir. There's nothing's been identified that is what use the term abnormal. I think nothing has been identified that would be abnormal in that respect.
Thank you. I think Mr. Butler's clarified it. I mean, I think I've referenced last week, I thought I'd seen a map, but I thought what I'd actually seen in terms of sewage network catchments was a reference. But the council has provided an answer to my specific question at, I think it was MIQ 3.9 at matter 3, in terms of, at a high level, strategic basis, where it sees foul water being treated, whether it's going to Hendon or to Howden. So I've got that evidence, and I'll reflect on whether I need anything further from those discussions. Mr. Waff, was there anything you wanted to come in on this particular point? You hesitate hovering.
There was, but it was covered by others.
And I added first thing this morning an item 3 under item 6 around agricultural land quality. I've discussed this already at other sites, but it's obviously relevant here. My understanding from the council, Mrs. Lamb, is that at the moment the mapping goes as far as say this is grade 3. There isn't yet the detail beneath that to kind of separate whether it's 3A or 3B, but the council nonetheless has taken a sort of a more precautionary approach to assume that it would be 3A and to assess the plan on that basis.
Yes, so through the site-specific assessments that were undertaken through the sustainability appraisal, the data set available at the time that they were undertaken assumed that all land in South Tyneside was grade 3, regardless if that was 3A, B or C. Obviously, as shown in our hearing statement for this site, we have added a map which is an update from the DEFRA's magic maps that does show a small portion of the site being 3A in the northwest of the site. But like I say, through our assessments and the plan preparation, we've sort of taken that precautionary approach and considered all land as being 3 throughout the plan.
Thank you. Mr. Butler, did you raised this morning, so I think you want to come in on this.
Thank you, sir. And again, thank you to Mrs. Lamb for that clarification that information is now available from the magic map. It shows that the highest quality agricultural land is in fact in the northwest corner, north of the public right-of-way. And I would ask you to put that into your considerations when considering if you are looking at a site reduction. And I'd also like clarity over how the council and the developers would proceed following their statement in the statement of common ground, where they say at 4.10 that no recent site-specific testing has been undertaken to establish if the site is subgrade 3A or 3B, and then they refer to paragraph 174 and the balance that you'll have to take over whether best and most versatile land should be a consideration. So we have a magic map which has suddenly appeared as part of the hearing statement. We've had a position for much of the local plan process that the land in South Tyneside is largely grade 3. So is it the case that from the magic map there has been some site testing, or is this a very indicative position that has been taken? So I'd just like some clarity on that, please.
Thank you. Very briefly, Mrs. Lamb, the source of map 7?
Yes, so there hasn't been any specific site testing undertaken on this site. That is a data set held by DEFRA at a national level, which has been updated at the beginning of this year, as far as I'm aware. Therefore, we've decided to use that information for transparency in terms of the production of our hearing statements.
Thank you. I don't recall seeing it anywhere, but Mrs. Lambert, I mean, in terms of this issue of grade 3 and separating it out, I mean, in terms of the latest DEFRA mapping, has it kind of revealed that there's grade 2 possibly, or is it just really clarifying within the grade 3?
Yes, so the mapping across the borough is very much predominantly grade 3 with very small pockets of 3A that's identified. Say a small pocket here, 2 small pockets on the Felgate site as well.
Thank you. I'm going to move on, if I may, to item 7 on my agenda, and it's the housing mix that's likely to come forward at this site. Obviously, there is accompanying viability work. I think this is a location that I think is identified as being able to support 25% affordable housing, and I appreciate that could be at variance to what was in the neighbourhood plan, but I appreciate this looking at the local plan's viability evidence. So I think I'd just like to hear briefly from the council in terms of the justification and kind of effectiveness of seeking 25% affordable housing on this site, please.
Yeah, so the affordable housing requirement throughout the plan is based on need identified in the strategic housing market assessment as well as the local plan viability update, and that identifies an affordable housing requirement of 25% in this area, and that's also in line with the recommendation at paragraph 7.10 in the SMAR.
If I deal with affordable housing first, I'm taking it from the Forum and from the Labour Party. If this site was to be allocated, you'd be seeking a higher affordable housing figure.
Thank you. So you intend to talk about affordable housing, and what about accommodation of elderly people and the housing mix generally?
I want to deal with that as well, but if we just deal with affordable housing first, and then we'll come on to older persons.
Yeah, just two very quick points. The Regulation 19 consultation indicated that affordable housing figure would be 30% for this site. Sorry, the Regulation 18 consultation indicated a 30% target. This has been reduced to 25%. It matters to the Neighbourhood Forum because one of the strong themes that came back in our consultation was, the cost of housing in the Forum area. People wanted their children to stay in the village. They wanted to be able to afford to move about within the village. And so the affordability mix is really important. And I just wanted to connect that to what seems to be happening nationally, where the government is, first of all, making additional funding available for affordable housing, so that might change the dynamics. And I think the recent consultation from the government is indicating that the affordable housing offer might actually enable other schemes to come forward more quickly. I know that might not be applicable here, but it's worth understanding. Thank you.
Mr. Butler, please.
Thank you, sir. In regard to the ward position, between Regulation 18 and 19, the local plan viability study came up with a view that Clevedon and East Boldon should be decoupled, and the study looked at house sales and provided limited evidence, unlimited evidence that East Boldon should be reduced to 25%, whereas Clevedon remains at 30%. We don't see the logic in that. We feel that the sites, in terms of the development industry, are equally attractive in terms of viability in either village, and therefore, why is it that the figure for East Boldon should be 5% lower? This is a large site. We've already pointed out to you the likely profit margins for this site, and therefore we consider that the figure should be 30%.
Thank you. Mr. Clifford, please.
Just to explain the reason for the difference, obviously the viability study was informed by evidence, and the evidence which Mr. Newham, who you met yesterday, found was that although the housing market in both areas is very strong, Clevedon, it's particularly strong, and there are higher sales values, so hence why there is a higher requirement in Clevedon.
Thank you. Well, I'm clear, I think, Mr Butler, Mr Thompson, what you would be seeking by way of a modification in terms of the affordable housing. If I can move on to the older persons accommodation and perhaps invite Mr Thompson first. I think clearly read from your the forum's representations, you think there's a specific need, or a specific need should be identified in the plan to provide for older persons accommodation on this site.
Yes, thank you. Both the neighbourhood plans housing need assessment and the evidence that the council has put forward, identifies this critical need. The difficulty for the council is that virtually all of its local plan delivery is by private developers. So it's really important that accommodation for elderly people is given every support. Our experience, however, is that commercially driven developers are less likely to promote this type of development, and the offer that comes forward from them, in our experience, is inadequate and very, very poor. The forum has put forward a mechanism, a suggestion of a mechanism that the NPPF identifies in paragraph 0, 12 and 13. And we also support the idea that the site requirements should stipulate a requirement for elderly people. As far as the neighbourhood forum area is concerned, many large houses, 3, 4 bedroom, are occupied by people who want to move and can't find the right accommodation within the village to move. If that was facilitated, many more family houses would come forward, and the community as a whole would be much better for it. So that's all I want to say on that. Thank you.
Is there anything further you wish to add on that, Mr Butler?
Just to reiterate the figures in relation to the strategic housing market assessment, a shortfall of 3,361 units across all classes of accommodation for older persons. And as Mr Thompson says, we are aware in the community of the real need for older persons housing in our ward, and recognise that it was a big issue during the neighbourhood plan process in East Boldon. There are a number of examples of successful retirement apartment facilities, both for sale and rent, in both villages, and we see that this site provides another opportunity, as did Cleedon Lane, for the housing market to come forward for more of this, but they're simply not interested. They're only looking at the larger 3 and 4 bedroom units to maximise profits.
Thank you. If I turn to the council, please. Obviously, the National Planning Policy Framework, the version we're working to, paragraph 62, talks about planning policies reflecting the needs for the housing need for different types of groups in the community, including, amongst other things, older people. I think the council is going to direct me to, it's got other policies in the plan that would that could be implemented or be taken into consideration in terms of providing for older persons accommodation. Is that the principal way that the council's seeking to meet the housing needs of this particular group, or do you make any other specific allocations in the plan for older persons housing?
So yeah, you're correct in that policies 19 and 20 specifically would look to provide accommodation for older people. There are some allocations in the plan that we envisage would be for supported accommodation. But yeah, it would be policy 19 and 20 in terms of this site that would provide that need.
Thank you for that. I don't know if from the Church Commissioner's perspective, Ms Hampson, obviously the site is put forward for housing. There's obviously a strong view in the local community for specific types of housing. I don't know if the Church Commissioners have seen that or have a view on that in terms of how the site could potentially come forward.
There's nothing particular to add other than what the council has said. Obviously, we would look at the site-specific requirements as and when we bring forward a planning application and sort of align to market need at that time.
Thank you. I think I'm clear on what the Labour Party and the Forum are seeking in terms of a potential modification to this policy. Okay, fine. I mean, it strikes me that the potential modifications could be around the lines of either a certain quantum of older persons provision is identified for this site, or a policy says, provision has to be made on this particular site. The exact extent or nature of that would have to be determined and considered as part of a planning application, but it would be a key consideration. I probably need to reflect on that more fully because it's probably not a matter unique to this particular site, but I take the point from East Boldon that they think there is a particular need for the housing need of their community. I'm going to come to the final point of this morning's agenda and discussion. It's just around the delivery time frame. This is just to help me as I'm sort of pulling together in my mind the overall housing trajectory and whether there'll be deliverable and developable supply, particularly the form of the deliverable supply on plan adoption. And a note from the Council's response to MIQ 540, I think in the Statement of Common Ground, that this is a site that, should this plan be adopted, is envisaged to come forward reasonably quickly and to contribute to the deliverable 5-year supply, with completions starting as soon as the year 2028-29. I think it's just understanding the evidence and some of the reasonableness about that particular profile. Thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. So we've kind of come to that position based on the constraints on the site and the site's in a single ownership and it's available for development. The site promoters have made clear that the site is available and ready for development as soon as possible, really. We base the sort of build out rate on the SHLA methodology, but the site promoters have made clear in the Statement of Common Ground that they envisage a quicker build-out rate than we've assumed in the SHLA.
Thank you. From the Church Commissioner's perspective, I mean, presumably you're not directly going to deliver or develop these homes, so there's a disposal process. I mean, to my mind, to get to delivery of 2028-29, so that's working back construction, possibly starting in certainly at some point in 2027. Think back to, you need a planning application, section 106, discharge of conditions, plan being adopted in 2026. This feels relatively tight, I have to say, from my experience perspective. Is there anything you can say that kind of can help persuade me that that's a realistic time frame?
I do acknowledge your point there, and we have spoken with the Church Commissioner's commercial advisors and suggest that that's probably a year earlier than we would expect. So we'd like to suggest that would be the first ones delivered in 2029, 2030, and that'd be the first 100 homes. So still the first 100 homes within the first 5 years of the plan period. Also, just to add, we are in the midst of starting to prepare our planning application, and we have obviously received significant interest from developers in the site. So there's nothing to say this won't come forward within those timeframes.
So can I just clarify, Ms Hampson? So I'm looking at paragraph 4.3 of a very recently signed statement of common ground. So saying there, delivery phase 1, 100 units, 20 to 20, excuse me, in the period 28 to 29. But I think from what you're saying a moment ago, earliest delivery might not happen as soon as what's put out in the Table 5 of the Council's evidence, which I think is undertaken from the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment.
Yes, that's correct. Obviously, we would like to bring it forward sooner, but we are just mindful of where the local plan process is and any potential delays it might have with our planning application. Therefore, that's why we've chosen a slight reduction in that time frame. But as I said, there's nothing to say that if everything proceeds smoothly and quickly, that might still occur in 2028. We just want to take a slightly more realistic view there in light of your comments made yesterday.
Okay, I'm going to get very confused by figures here because previously through the Strategic Housing Land Availability in the same period, I'm counting 58 units, possibly slightly less, depending on how the Statement of Common Ground has been, where we're looking at in 28, 29. And it's whether if there was a slight delay or we push things back by a year, whether there's kind of recovery within certainly the deliverable period of the deliverable years to kind of recoup pushing the 28 back. Yeah. If we can't get to the bottom of it right now,
I think it might be helpful. Might be helpful if we had a chat during the luncheon adjournment, actually.
yes, I mean, I'm probably going to bring Boldon to conclusion.
Yes, I
before
understand
lunch,
that.
but I think
just to whilst the church commissioners are here.
Yeah. Okay. I think my view would be 2028, 29 is very optimistic for units built, and it's whether there's a revised trajectory profile that needs to be considered. Now, it may be that it kind of does talk to paragraph 4.3 of the Statement of Common Ground, whether it's those specific years, but in terms of 28, 30, whether the site could yield more on an annual basis. But I think I'd like to leave that as a point for the council to help clarify.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And of course the figures are rather divergent from those in Table 5.
Yep.
So we need to bottom that out.
And can I just understand from the council before I come to Mr. Butler or anybody else, we've obviously talked about various infrastructure delivery plan elements, not least potential off-site highway improvements. Does that correlate to the build-out rates or link to the build-out rates that are shown, or is that something else we need to have in mind in terms of whether there's anything that's going to potentially need to be done before first completion or occupations?
Sir, in terms of the infrastructure delivery plan, as was mentioned previously, the junction improvements have not been timetabled. I think there might be a broad kind of overview of when they're needed in relation to the development trajectory. but that will obviously be informed by when the planning applications are actually submitted. And the transport assessments that are submitted with the planning applications, and ditto in terms of school provision and health improvements.
Can I ask for the council, when looks more again at this particular kind of profile of this trajectory, what I have in mind is the IDP, from my reading of it, appears to say that there are particular junctions that are critical in terms of the Boca Lane, Front Street improvements by 2030. And I just want to be assured that whatever profile for this site ultimately is agreed, hopefully with the church commissioners, it also reflects whether there are any critical infrastructure improvements that need to be done prior to any kind of first occupation at this stage, based on the evidence we have before us. So I could take possibly a more robust view about where this site might come into the trajectory. I appreciate there may be some optimism over time if further work shows through modal shift, etc., that improvement doesn't need to come in at that particular point. But I think just think about a kind of keep coming back to a kind of a worst case scenario, because there are ways in which we can look at this when we come on to the housing trajectory, in terms of how things are profiled. I'm very keen that we have a plan-led system, and as part of that we have all the sites that are identified, particularly in deliverable supply elements. I'm got reasonable confidence, and it may be just how we look at the trajectory and going to start using the word stepped, or there are other things we can look at to kind of just put the council on a firm footing.
I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Butler, please.
Thank you, sir. I share your analysis of the likelihood of this site coming forward in the period it was suggested in the Statement of Common Ground. And to have a Statement of Common Ground submitted to you, and yet during the hearing of the day have that Statement of Common Ground torn up in terms of the strategy of delivery is a real concern. The second point is the local community will be absolutely dismayed to hear that the church commissioners are considering a planning application before you have made any decision about the suitability of this site. You have to decide on whether there's exceptional circumstances to go into the green belt. You have to decide, and you've already indicated to the council there, as to whether this site is suitable to come forward in relation to the infrastructure concerns that you have just given. And I was going to point out, in terms of the trajectory, we don't have any detail of when these junction improvements, which are critical to development, would come forward, how they would come forward, how they would be funded. So I would urge the Church Commissioners agents to go back and reconsider putting a planning application forward. If they are considering to do so, I would urge them to immediately contact the East Boldon Neighbourhood Forum to start the earliest possible discussions about how they see an application going forward. And clearly, if we are into application process before this plan is determined, then I would urge the council to give the weight of the East Boldon Neighbourhood Plan. This site is outside the settlement boundary of the East Boldon Neighbourhood Plan, and the current framework means that the test of exceptional circumstances would be needed before the council could be assured of this site's decision, not purely on a planning application. We have the housing delivery test situation, the presumption in favour situation, pushing the council into an early decision of a planning application being brought forward. So I urge them to reconsider that.
Thank you. And I should also add, it's not been lost on me from the early days of this examination hearings, when we come back to housing delivery and overall numbers, we will need to look with the council on the Cleedon Lane site and where that's accounted for, or where it could possibly be accounted for. So that's in the mix as well. I'll go to Mr. Waff first and then to Mr. Thompson, and then we're probably going to adjourn for lunch and bring this session to a conclusion. Mr. Waff.
Thank you, sir. It'll come as no surprise. Obviously, speed of delivery is clearly a key consideration to meet the housing need in the borough. I'll refer to the written evidence we've previously submitted in regards to why the eastern portion of the site, of which I'm representing Bellway Homes, is being discounted in place of the western parcel of the site. Clearly, we're a national house builder. We can deliver promptly. We can deliver improvements to the green belt along the wildlife corridor to the north. We can deliver quickly on the site to the east. I'm sure that's not lost on you.
Okay, Mr. Thompson, please.
Well, we are dismayed to hear that a planning application is coming forward, especially at a time when the council it continues to fail its housing delivery test. And I just wanted to tease out this particular aspect, how difficult it is to achieve good design. The pressure that the council is put under in this situation is incredible. And time again, we see developers turning around, looking at the neighbourhood plan and paying no regard to them whatsoever. This is always complicated by pre-application discussions. The NPPF does not give authority for a local authority like South Tyneside to insist that neighbourhood plans are considered and the neighbourhood forum is consulted. And what we end up with, and this is so common, the initial outline design for the site, which is informed by the developer's bottom line, becomes almost set in stone before the community is consulted. And it is so difficult to actually move anything in the right direction to achieve good design. I don't know what can be done about it, but it really is a difficulty for us. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm going to bring this morning's or today's session on East Boldon to a conclusion. Can I thank everybody for their contributions to this session? There are a couple of things I'll need to record with the council as kind of action points going forward and reflect on the proposed modifications that have been put forward in the statement of common ground, but I'll pass that through in the usual way through the programme officer. Just want to clarify, Mr. Thompson, I've been sitting here now for best part of a week and a half, and I'm going to be sitting here tomorrow, and I'll be very tired. Where was this miraculous place that kind of restore people? Was it the Grey Horse? Okay, I'll bear that in mind. Okay, thank you everybody. I'll be seeing some of you again here 2 o'clock for Town End Farm. Thank you.